Commissioners. We're going to be discussing budget finance and I believe our jail. Jason, I believe you have a memo you wanted to go over. Thank you, ma'am.
But yeah, I think we'll probably be free flowing here today. Thanks, Commissioner. I just kind of wanted to give a status update, history update, I guess, on where we were, or where we are, and where we probably need to be thinking about as far as the Public Safety Center. Just for the record, we did complete the programming component of the Safety Center in the fall of 2022. Obviously, the program is kind of the macro level planning, sizing, square footage, site assessment, cell count, etc. of the jail and the sheriff's overall operations, including road patrol, SWAT, etc. We presented the results of that study in November of 2022, both to the county commissioners in a public session and to the Lake County Community Corrections Board. There were numerous meetings with the sheriff's staff, management, etc. Myself and the commissioners I know were involved in a couple of the early meetings, local mental health providers and so on, to get a comprehensive review, analysis, and understanding of what we have, and probably more importantly, where we need to go forward. As most folks know, but to enter into the record, the current jail was opened in '90 with a bed count of approximately 353 beds. We brought over 100 inmates from the quote-unquote old jail, 9 of which were females. Today, those numbers are dramatically different. Due to open bed space in that jail when it was open, we had a number of federal marshals in there and 60 Cuyahoga County inmates, which really helped with the financing of the jail that we know today. Pre-COVID, the current jail was averaging 320 to 360 inmates a day, which is obviously over the 353 that it was designed for. It was not uncommon pre-COVID, and numbers are starting to move that direction, to have over 400 inmates in the current Lake County jail. Interestingly enough, the sheer volume is one challenge, but the operational challenges associated with the separation of populations. I noted 9 females came over in 1990. We've had upwards of 100 females in the current facility, which presents challenges for the COs, etc., on the separation of those inmates. 2/3 of the jail inmates are felons versus 1/3 when we open the jail. Once again, an operational shift that challenges the current facility. Over the past 10 years, notably, and I don't have to tell anyone this, the jail is home to, I think the number in the sheriff is in here, 60 to 70% of the inmates have substance abuse or some sort of mental health issue, resulting in dramatic operational challenges, training, medical facilities, etc., that we are woefully short on currently in the jail. Additionally, inadequate kitchen and laundry spaces in the current operation, lack of general office space just for the sheriff's daily operations. I know we've been into a lot of meetings over at Sheriff Leon Bruno's facility. They have one conference room over there for the most part, so training facilities are extremely tight. Inadequate space for SWAT, command vehicles, etc. The Sally Port is severely too small for the amount of volume of prisoner transport, that come in and out of there on a daily basis. And then just some general compliance issues with the ADA and what we would need to do should we have renovated that facility. All these things were confirmed with the result of the programming study. Just a quick bit of history, as the commissioners know, there have been 2 to 3 previous analyses of the jail. Do we renovate? Do we add on? Etc. Do we look at external sites? And the Cliff Note version is we're nearing or at the end of useful life to the vast majority of the mechanicals in the facility, and the facility at most times is full. So the direction was made in the fall to look at what a new facility would look like. The HOK results that were presented to the Corrections Board and to the commissioners in November. Once again, there has not been detailed design. That would be a next step, but the program proposed an approximate 204,000 square foot facility, which would be 504 beds. So that's an increase of about 140 or so beds in the current facility. It should be noted that 504 bed count number was reduced after some, I'll call value engineering, after a first estimate came in. And that number to date is still a comfortable number with the sheriff as far as 504 beds. And additional to the number of beds, a significant emphasis on flexible space for education, training, medical, and substance abuse facilities, increased need for our adult probation department, and then obviously the sheriff's office itself, the administration, the SWAT, the road patrol, detective bureau, among others who need additional space for the long term. The rough order of magnitude, please note that this was in November based on a program, so these are not detailed designs. The budget estimate from HOK, and I did speak with HOK earlier this week. They have some other jobs that are coming in, and hopefully we'll get a look at what the market is doing in this discipline. Has a range of $161 million to $170 million. That is an all-in number, so there are significant contingencies built into that, which I appreciate. I know Commissioner Pletchik and I have had this. Hopefully we do not use those, but we have to consider an all-in cost that also has a number for demolition of the current facility. Soft cost, pre-construction, general conditions, permits, testing, etc. FF&E, which is furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, IT, signage is all in there. A couple things that Mike and I have been, Mr. Matus, Finance Director, we've been talking about as we plow ahead here is what's the impact of the current market, competition from surrounding counties. For example, it's been no secret that Cuyahoga County has been considering a new justice center, including a jail, for a number of years. So there's some competition there. Supply chain concerns. We hear from Randy, we hear from Mr. Gills every week on various projects to a much lesser degree on what they're seeing from supply chain. Labor, we have great skilled labor here in Northeast Ohio. What if Cuyahoga County proceeds? What's the impact of Intel in Columbus? There's more and more indications that a lot of the skilled tradesmen are going to be needed in Central Ohio to fulfill that significant project down there. And Mike and I ad nauseum have talked about escalation, inflation, interest rates, etc. And Mike can expand on that a little bit today based on a call we had this morning. And then the value of time. What is the value of time? This project has been contemplated. I've been the administrator since 2012 when we first started taking an in-depth look, giving the facility a physical. HOK stated at a meeting, I think we were all at, I think it might have been the November meeting, approximately $1 million a month for a project of this scale is the value of time today. So that's a quick history of the Public Safety Center. Mike has noted from a county general fund, this is our largest capital expenditure that we are contemplating, probably second only to the SR2 project that was occurred a number of years ago, but that was not the general fund. So this is a significant project we know that we're going to need to address. A couple items that I think, depending on the direction of the board today, tomorrow, what have you, once again, this was spelled out in the memo, the draft memo that I put together. The Finance Director Matus and I have been reviewing fund balances, and Mike will get into this, general fund expenditures, etc. now that the 2023 budget was adopted. We have a couple different scenarios today. You know, what would a down payment be based on the Commissioner's request? Some interest rate calculations. Mike has I'll call a plug and play spreadsheet that we can literally play with on the fly as far as what's a down payment, interest rate of 5%, what's the term, etc. And if need be, we can, get outside counsel to add value input if the board desires. As we work through the finance strategy, and I'll conclude here briefly, there are some things that I could be doing at the board's approval to continue moving the football down the field. Obviously, the site is at the 125 East Erie Street, which is directly across from the current jail. We have two structures there. 125 East Erie itself is home to the public defender. Prosecutor Colson has a few auxiliary offices there. That building, as well as the former OSU extension structure, will need to be raised to provide a shovel-ready site, if you will. To do those, we have to relocate the public defender. We would need to relocate Mr. Colson's offices. I think there's 5 maybe, plus or minus. In anticipation of that, As you know, we acquired 41 East Erie Street last summer. That is what's known as the Cannon, well, I call it the Cannon Sternaveni Malcheski building back in the day. We currently have tenants in that building probably through the end of the summer, which works out okay. That is a law firm, and it has the bones. It may need some work, some renovation work to meet public defender's needs, Mr. Colson's needs, etc. I can begin that process, which is going to have a substantial number tied to it, with Buildings and Grounds Superintendent Mark Eiffelise, Paul Stefanko, potentially some outside engineering firm, depending on the significance of the reconstruction. I can begin that at your direction. Should we begin that process, I can also begin the bid documentation, the bid process for demolition of 125 East Erie Street and the former OSU Extension building. Once again, those will take time, they'll take some effort, and they will take some financial resources. That would be the demolition would be funded from and I talked to Mr. Matus about this, via the Public Safety Center Fund that we've worked on. The improvements to the Cannon Sternaveni building would be financed via the Permanent Improvement Fund that we have created a number of years ago. As all of that is going on, and this has been going on, we have the HOK Stage 2 contract. So the Stage 2 contract, matter of fact, I was on the phone with outside counsel this morning, Mr. Hackman. This is the criteria architect package. This would be for the schematic and detailed design that includes a number of disciplines, including architecture, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, structural, technology, civil site, code assessment, vertical transportation, operations, kitchen, and laundry. This is an approximate $5 million contract that, based on my conversations the past couple weeks, including an hour ago, will probably be in working order in the next couple weeks. There's some insurance liability coverages that outside counsel is going to be working with them to get some clarity on that. So once again, per the board's desire, I can begin bid specifications to tear some buildings down. We can look at remodeling a couple existing facilities, all in preparation for what a public safety center timeline looks like. Schedule on this particular phase. Should we sign a contract tomorrow, we're looking at 16 weeks for schematic design, which is step one in the design. Well, I should say kind of step two. We did step one, which is the program. 16 weeks for schematic design, 9 weeks for design development, and that's when we get our GMP, our guaranteed maximum price. And I should also note, simultaneously, and I know Commissioner Hamercheck knows this from construction, we will begin to entertain the RFQ process to bring on our design build team, where the drawings will be handed off to an architect of record and essentially our contractor. We will run those simultaneously to hopefully tighten the timeline of the overall project. Start to finish, we're thinking this is probably from the day we sign a contract 3 to 4 years before we open up the doors, just to give everyone some perspective on the significance of this project. I did speak to our project manager from HOK last week. They would need probably mid-May before all those folks I indicated a minute ago, architectural, HVAC, mechanical, that everybody would be mobilized should the county say go on the Stage 2 contract. Once again, obviously, the $5 million contract would be financed by the Public Safety Fund. Additionally, to some items that I can continue to work on. Obviously, we acquired 41 East Erie Street. We also acquired what I call the former Chicago Title Building over here on the corner at 168 North St. Clair Street. We have partnered, and I want to thank Mr. Rogers and the Land Bank Board on a 50-50 cost share for that project. Spoke with Mr. Eiffelise last week. The environmental review, abatement, et cetera, the bid documents are underway to raise that building. Jason Boyd's idea is that should be paved for auxiliary, ancillary parking should we move forward with the Public Safety Center, because we're going to need to find some parking not only for folks who will be displaced in the 125 lot, but also the sheer number of contractors that will be mobilized on the site for the next couple years. Additionally, there are a number of ancillary parcels that I've been working on as far as getting appraisals in and around the Burger King parcel on Erie Street. I am working with a local realtor to gauge any interest for fee simple acquisition of some of those ancillary parcels along Jackson Street and North St. Clair Street, excuse me. So more to be determined as far as that's concerned. And also, the Burger King, as most everyone knows, closed a number of months ago. The HOK analysis clearly indicates the need for that parcel. It provides great flexibility now and into the future. So we are working on appraisals as we speak, and working with that building went up for lease. Matter of fact, probably about a month ago now, initial conversations on our extreme interest in that particular parcel for a public safety center. So once again, another item that I have been working on and will continue to work on at the board's desire to keep moving this football down the field. There are a lot, and speaking from my experience on this building, it is vital that we get the early planning and logistics figured out prior to moving a shovel of dirt. And I think a lot of these steps that I've laid out will go a long way to providing that, and they're going to have to be done anyways. So I'm happy to begin that process. And finally, the last item on my punch list, if you will, is short-term parking. I subscribed to the Mayor Anderson version of parking when I moved to Willoughby years ago. Is that, they had a parking problem in 1980 when there was parking all over the place because nobody visited downtown Willoughby. We have parking in county control right now. People have to walk 4 minutes. Believe me, I walked every parking spot under our control before we built this building. It's not a popular response that we have to walk a little bit, but this is a downtown environment. But I will concede that should we proceed with the public safety center, we're going to need to find some short-term parking. I have some ideas as far as leasing some parking from some private landowners in downtown Painesville, which we did. I don't know if Mike remembers, behind Key Bank. We had a 1-year lease for some parking that we actually designated contractor parking when we built this building. I just wanted to present this memo as a status update and a potential roadmap of where we can go, and some of the required action items I would need from the board, so Mike and I can begin in earnest to move this project forward. As I noted, early planning and logistical management are critical on a construction project to this scale. And without a doubt, I have full confidence that we have the team in place once we get this plan agreed upon. And with that, on the Public Safety Center, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Mike has some financial numbers to look at as far as where we stand as of December 31st, 2022, and what some ideas based on commissioners' input, cash liquidity, down payment, etc. And Mike, if you don't mind, I'll kind of give a brief. We had a couple calls. We have the highest bond rating that we're probably ever going to get. We have to be cognizant of what that looks like throughout the balance of a 30-year term, ability to pay, rainy day funds, etc. But Mike and I are here to listen, to take your objectives in a sustainable manner and accomplish what the board wants to accomplish over the long term, yet maintaining all the other critical functions that the county that we're obligated to perform per the Ohio Revised Code. So with that, I'll answer questions on my memo, and then we can turn it over to Mr. Matus and kind of get into some of where we're at fiscally. And Mike also has the spreadsheet that I referenced where we can look at what is 170, less 50, less 55, what a term, et cetera. And we can start to see those numbers in real time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. In regard to that, I have had numerous discussions with the various commissioners about down payments and so forth with that. Just to give a brief history, we did do a sales tax increase back in 2012 and 2013 when layoffs were a distinct possibility for various departments with that. So at that time, the prior board established a budget stabilization fund, a payroll liability fund, funded the permanent improvement to the necessary level for all the upcoming construction, and then also created a public safety fund. This board currently has asked me to try to put as much money into the public safety fund as possible. So with that, we've always talked about using the public safety fund and the general allotment of $10 million from ARPA funds. I know one commissioner has brought up the use of $15 million for that. That's going to be a group decision by 2/3 of the board with that, because there's a lot of requests that we have received and funded with ARPA funds. So at the end of the year, the general fund was $8.7 million. We're required to have enough in there to meet the first few months worth of expenditures with that. We do receive real estate taxes twice a year, and that does not come in on a monthly basis. The budget stabilization has $9 million. That is what we've talked about to use in case of when we had layoffs back in 2011 and 2010. We created that fund, so if there is a blip in the radar, there'll not be layoffs. That's what that was created for. Payroll liability on our annual financial report, we have to put what are payroll liabilities out there. 14.9 does not cover everything, but that's for every fund with that. Debt service, really, that is on there just because we do not have a lot of debt currently on the county's books, and that will end in 2025, and no payments will be due for 2026. With that being said, that equates to approximately $1.2 million. The Public Safety Fund, I think the commissioners have heard me talk about this as so many times that they know the money. I rounded up to $40 million. The commissioners, like I said, prior board as well as this current board have asked me to put as much away as possible with that. And we also have the ARPA funds on there. I did email the board on Thursday with a spreadsheet from every single fund at the end of 2022. I know there has been some talk about using developmental disabilities, etc. That legally is not allowed. I think Mr. Colson has beat that in ad nauseum on that, but I did include on the spreadsheet I sent you on Thursday, every single fund balance, every dollar amount that we have on the books of 2022. Yes, it's $393 million, but that we cannot use developmental disabilities, narcotics, the crime lab, the health district. There's agency funds on there for real estate that gets distributed to the individual municipalities throughout that. So the commissioners asked me to run scenarios with a 10%, 20%. Well, they asked me to run scenarios. I did 10, 20, 30, and 50%. What the balance down payment would be and the effect that has. In talking to bond counsel and our underwriters, they have said that we could be facing, if we do utilize those, Moody's is going to look at the fund balances and may, not shall, may downgrade us from our bond rating. That would be 5 to 10 basis points currently on that, and it's a coupon rate. The average that they feel right now, the interest rate has went down a little bit in our favor. It's about 5% right now, anywhere between 4 and 5.5, because they're going to do it. It's a 30-year bond that it would be. So it would be, on average, it would be about 5%. Last time we ran this scenario, it was about 5.37 that's we did. Now, we just did do an engineer note that it came in a little bit better than what we thought, but significantly higher than what it is in the past. So we ran every scenario about taking some percentage of these various funds, so that will be up to the board to decide. We also have to take into effect the effect that has on interest earnings, because the lower that you have to invest, the lower your interest earnings will be, as well as the effect that has on bond counsel or on our bond rating and so forth. So with that, if it goes down, of course, our interest rates are going to go up. And like I said, I gave every scenario we had. We've always talked about putting $50 million down on the jail, which when we talked to our bond writer and our bond counsel and underwriters, They are very impressed with that. They feel Moody's would be impressed with that, but they also did echo to us that Moody's will want to know a dedicated revenue stream. And that they will negatively look upon using those fund balances to some degree. To that extent, we do not know until we actually have the bond rating phone call for this. We will definitely have to do a full-blown bond rating phone call as well as an official statement with that. So the scenarios are up here. You guys all got that spreadsheet on Thursday. So you guys can direct Mr. Boyd and myself of what you guys foresee in the future. And like I said, this is just one capital project. As I noted before, we have numerous ones out there. We still have to do the sheriff range that's coming to completion very shortly. We also receive permanent improvement requests all the time. The current general fund budget that you guys graciously passed did not include vehicle purchases for various departments and so forth. We always look at that throughout the year. So this budget was approximately 70 million, like we discussed. And like I said, this is the scenarios that I have been asked to prepare by the board, and it'll be their decision and their direction that takes us. But there is also significant other capital improvements, such as the EOC that we have discussed, tuck pointing on buildings. We receive requests every single day, and that goes upon, I have started to receive the request after departments watch the budget hearings about current salaries of their employees and wanting to know what other departments were provided, and feel that they will, all indications are they will be asking the board for market adjustments for that as well. As we know, we are in the middle of negotiations for 8 different sheriff. They did provide us an update at the executive session last Thursday. We also will have some opening up, if I'm not mistaken. I believe the union within the prosecutor's office staff also had a wage opener for April 1st. So that will have an impact on the general fund as well. These are not one-time costs. They will compound upon itself annually with that. What the prosecutors received, what the sheriff will be receiving, what they've always been allocated, along with everyone else with the general fund. So any questions that the board has, this is, like I said, the outline, and then you guys can direct Mr. Boyd and myself on what you feel is the next step for us to take.
Yeah, and if I might add, Mike, just for those folks who may be tuning in and can't see the screens, Mike took the December 31st, 2022 fund balances. If we took, once again, scenarios, Commissioner, 10% of budget stabilization, payroll liability, permanent improvement, and then included the 40 million of public safety and the 10 of ARPA, we have the liquidity of $53.2 million. If we took 20%, we would be 1.8 of budget stabilization, 2.9 of payroll liability, and 2.9 of permanent improvements, plus public safety, plus ARPA. We're at $57 million in change for a potential, in Jason Boyd layman terms, down payment on a jail. 30%, if we took 30% of said accounts, $61 million down payment, and 50% would be a $68.7 million down payment. As you guys know, I've learned so much from Mike in my 10 years working with him. You know, we have to look at that 170 number. We hope it's, as Mike said, we hope it's 140, and we hope revenues come through the roof, but we can't swing and miss. So scenario, 10% is a $53 million down payment, 20% is 57.1, 30% is 61, and a 50%. Should the board take 50% of those balances, you're looking at a 68.7 potential $1 million down payment. A couple things that we need to consider. I noted briefly some parcel acquisitions that we're still working on, one of which will probably have a little bit higher of a price tag than some of the other ones. Those will all come out of the, and I noted that in my draft correspondence to you, those would come out of the permanent improvement funds, and obviously that's why that's there. And then just, Mike and I were chatting, and when we look at the salary line items moving forward, if we, and Mike, maybe the number's maybe $2 million all in this year on new salaries, we have to compound that annually 3%. God only knows what years 12, 13, 14 would look like. So we have to be cognizant of those requests too. We have a capital planning meeting this week with Mark Eifelis and Paul Stefanko, which are really great meetings that keep us ahead of the game, but also really depressing meetings because we have to balance the commissioner's desire with Public Safety Center and conversations on other projects versus keeping the lights on some projects. I think I noted in this memo, unfortunately in Building B, the elevator is beyond useful life. The darn thing, we've got contractors here. That's going to need to be replaced to the tune of $400,000 is the early estimate. So once again, commissioner's decision, but we definitely need some liquidity in these accounts moving forward. But I wanted to, Mike and I, to give you a sense of where we are, well, real time, but as of closing the books December 31st, 2022. Mike didn't note it, but I think he will. He's told me from day one, I also rely on building department permits and et cetera, but transfer and conveyance standards, when I looked, I think are 7 or 8 months down. So that's a trend that we have to keep an eye on as far as revenues, counterbalance to a point on investment earnings, et cetera. It's a very fluid document, but from a liquidity standpoint, that is where we are at today.
And one thing to make sure that we take into consideration is our bond counsel and underwriters have both, in my time working with them over the last 17 years, is we have not issued a lot of long-term debt in the history of since I've been here. However, every year the bond ratings bureaus will review our financial statements. So if they do see a decline, it may not affect the jail financing, but any future projects that the utilities department does, the engineers department does. They emphasized that again this morning, just to keep that in the back of your mind as well. This isn't a one-time make a decision. This decision is going to have lasting impacts on a future generation of Lake County residents. So.
And I don't know how far in, and I know we've got other topics to talk about, but if you want to look at some of those scenarios or how, as far as what does 5% look like at X over X amount of years, I mean, we have the ability to have those conversations. We'll leave it to you guys just to get a feel on, what it looks like. I think this is, do you have that, Mike?
Without objection, this is the time and place, so.
I'm just going to write down the different numbers here just so we have round numbers, and then I'll run the sheet.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Sure.
do we have any idea what the cost would be to do the building for the public defender and where they move?
I don't, Commissioner. The building where they would go is it probably needs a little work. I mean, it's a fairly large footprint. It is a law firm, a title agency. So layout wise, it's not bad. But Commissioner Hamercheck has been in the building. We're probably so that was a wise purchase, a short-term need and a long-term purpose. If the long-term purpose is actually there, we're going to have to replace everything in there: boilers, roof. Windows. Should the commissioners provide the go-ahead at a meeting, I would get Mark and Paul in there again. They've been in there a couple times. I would probably get a local architect engineering firm in there, as well as Ms. Clapp and Mr. Colson say, all right, you need 5 offices. What do we have to do? Probably need separate in like almost 2 different offices. I'm making an assumption there, but I would want to get the folks who are going to be in there, and that's noted in my memo, in there sooner than later, because that's going to need to happen before I can tear down the other structures.
Right. So just in regards to that, we'll start with the first one.
Mike, is your mic on?
Oh, sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. We'll start with the first one. We're going to use just $170 million as a cap with this. If we do put $50 million down and we receive a 5% interest rate, that would be a debt service payment of $7.8 million. And then what we will do is do all the different scenarios. What's that? Yeah. Very first square here with that. Oh, let me see. the 7,806,172, and that's going out 120 million at 5% over 30 years. If you look at, if we would borrow more, of course, the debt service payments would go higher, of course. If we put down 55 million, it goes down to $7.48 million at 5%. If we would put down 60 million, it goes to $7.1 million. Almost seven, a little over, rounding up, it would be 7.2. If we put down 65 million, debt service is 6.8 million. And if we put down 70 million, which was on the very high end, even over what the 50% threshold was, that's still a debt service payment of $6.5 million. So the debt service or the down payment does affect it. However, the commissioners have to weigh having a backstop there versus what it would be. So that is the scenarios that we came up with that. So the debt service really, like I said, anywhere from 6.5 to 7.8 million per year, depending on that. Of course, we would put in callable if it was after so many years to see if the interest rates do trend down. But like I said, 5% is probably about what they said the coupon rate. The yield, they said it's that's up in the air right now. I know the commissioners do receive a month or a weekly update from Stifel, from just showing what the market is and what the interest rates are with that. Of course, if interest earnings are up, they're going to charge us higher interest rates to borrow money. And what Mr. Boyd touched upon it before, we're now at 9 months in a row with conveyance fees. That's definitely showing that the housing market is slowing. That doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, but 9 months in a row after being up 25 in a row, that's a sheer indication. One's two's a blip, three's a trend. We're now up to 9. So like I said, this is a commissioner's decision on how they want to fund it going forward, and everything else that they have to weigh with the other various capital projects that have been requested by departments, as well as a lot of outstanding payroll issues for a lot of departments I feel that you guys are going to be facing. So, but you guys asked for every scenario possible. So without draining them all, draining those funds completely, but like I said, the scenarios have been outlined in the email to you guys on Thursday, and here's a debt service so you can see in real time with what the debt service payments would be. Like I said, if you want, you can, 30 years when we talked to bond council, that was the maximum that we, because we even kicked around about 35 years and so forth, but they feel 30 is the amount or the limit on that. Of course, if you do it over shorter time, you pay more debt service. If you look at borrowing 100 million over 30 years at 6.5, if you do it over 29 years at 6.6, and all the way down to 17 years, it would be 8.8 million. So, but that is just something the board will have to decide what they direct Mr. Boyd and myself. And like I said, we have definitely talked about the different scenarios. We've went over all of our thought process with bond counsel and our underwriters. And this is, we all agree that this is, it's really the commissioner's decision, and we'll carry your vision out for you.
Well, if I might add real quick too, just on some of our calls, some of the issues might not be when we issue the debt, but every year analysis and how we answer, how are you going to support the debt annually over 30 years at existing revenues? Mike's a genius, but it's all the other things that a lot of folks don't see, the other elected officials and department heads and projects and our vital emergency operations center. So we have to be able to prepare. Mike and I, God willing, we have to look at this 30 years out. I don't think we won't be here, but I know the task at hand is right in our nose right now. But he and I, we look at, what's year 5 look like, year 10. We want to hand this place off in a better shape in which we found it. So these are kind of the cards that we have here just for the Public Safety Center. But we know there's other projects in the operational side, healthcare costs, just general personnel cost here. I think the commissioners are very gracious in the budget they provided. We just have to look at the long-term impacts of that. So with that, we're open to any questions. Mike, anything else we were chatting about?
I think you nailed it, sir.
So, Mr. Matus, a couple of things I'd like to expand the discussion into, just make sure that we're looking at the full picture. Number one, I think we should consider whether or not we want that all-inclusive bond amount. When you say that 170 million, which by the way is worst case scenario, 170 million is the number. That obviously includes demolition of the old facility, which will likely won't occur for some years. I think we need to reasonably ask, do we want to borrow everything, or would it behoove us to lower the amount we borrow and then pay for that out of current money when it comes due 4 years later, as opposed to borrowing the money and having it sit there and paying interest on it while we're at it, given the historic high rate of interest. So I think we need to look at those issues. How much do we actually bond out? What do we actually need of that 170 million in order to do this project? And what that number is most realistically going to be, given that we really have a range, including the contingencies of 140 to 170. So I think we need to consider that range. We need to consider how much of it we need to borrow. And one other question that I have, as I recall, my brief stint, my brief vacation from the board in December, I know that the surplus last year dramatically exceeded the projections, as it usually does. And I want you to, for our review, state what funds that surplus was placed into.
With regards to the jail, when you have a guaranteed max price, you have to have all the funds in place. You have to legally have that. It has to be encumbered. So whatever it is, if it is 160, that's what we'll bond. If it's 170, that's what it is. You guys asked me to do every scenario with that. So until I have the GMP cost, I have to base it on $170 million with that. We're still at the early stages of that. However, I don't think it's going to get lower than that. With regards to every cash transfer, the board has approved. All of the board has received the cash transfers, and they all signed off on that. Significantly, we did place in the public safety facility. That's what the board directed me to do, the board at that time. General fund, we did not put any dollars in budget stabilization, zero. I don't recall off the top of my head payroll liability. I can look at that. We did try to reimburse permanent improvement for the costs that we had. 2022 was that. So the board actually, I have no decision-making authority. I only provide you guys what funds that I think it should be in. You guys have the decision. I know I talked to Commissioner Regovich and with that when he was here, and he said, I want to try to put down the biggest down payment on the jail as possible, and that's what I directed with that. It's ironic that that fund was created a lot with what we did under the prior board with CARES Act funds. That's why that got a significant boost. Last year it did also got a significant boost. However, conveyance fees were significantly higher, recorder's fees, etc. Ms. Lynch came in with hers, projecting out a definite decrease with that. So to go to your funds, it was permanent improvement. It was payroll liability, and the majority of the end of the year cash transfers for public safety. I hope that occurs every year.
Mike,
But
just to put a real fine point on this so people can understand.
yeah,
The boost to the general fund from the CARES Act money, we replaced monies specifically for law enforcement.
Correct.
The sheriff's office. Could you elaborate on that for benefit of all?
Yeah, we worked with the various different attorneys that helped us with CARES Act, and we worked with the feds. Used my experience working with the state auditors that could be, it was allowable for public safety. A lot of the entities throughout the Lake County did that. It was a savings to general fund, and therefore all of that proceeds were put into the public safety fund. It basically reduced, if you looked at the sheriff budget that we talked about during the budget hearings, back then it was significantly lower because we moved the expenditures from the general fund to the CARES Act fund. We're going to be doing that the same way this year with ARPA funds, and we'll do the same thing with regards to that. That's the 10 million. It's not going to magically become 20. It's still going to say 10 million. So I hope we have a surplus every year. I have to prepare for the worst case scenario. I think I've said this ad nauseum. If I swing and miss, it's people's livelihoods. So I hope we come in. I hope it comes in at $105 million. That's why I would like to put a callable on the bonds. So if we can pay it off in a shorter time, that would be fantastic. So with that, going from a 1.2 million.
Hold on. Let's finish putting a fine point on this. That CARES Act money, we have to account for it so that everybody can understand it. In the beginning of the pandemic, COVID, the original guidance said you have to account for the hours of law enforcement associated with COVID reactions and responses, also the corrections officers, all that. But
Yes.
later the guidance turned to just pay them. The guidance came through and it opened it up to allow us to just flat out pay them out of that.
Which we worked with our attorneys with that, and that's what we ended up doing, is moving a portion of that. Of course, we couldn't move the elected officials, but we did do their hospitalization and so forth with that. Yes, they did open up the guardrails a little bit. Yes.
And that's why there appears to be a change, and while there's this abundance of money, but that was a one-time infusion. One time.
Correct. Back then, yes. And I hope every year that we proceed or exceed our expected revenues. I can't base that on that. If you guys know that, please let me know, and I'll go put some money in the whatever bonds and stocks that you guys know about that are definitely going to 100% go up, and I will personally put my own savings in there. And like I said, our treasurer does a great job. He's trying to increase our amount that we invest. However, if these funds go down, he won't have as much to invest. So that is also, it's all a balancing act with that. So I've looked at this. We've been working on a jail since 2012 and even before that. I have different scenarios just in this file that you can see up on the board. It went from borrowing $10 million for 15 years to $15 million to $30 million over 15 years, all the way up to $60 million. We've worked with bond counsel and our underwriters at linked with this. Like I said, this is the biggest capital project that we've ever had here under the county. So I know under my watch, I don't want to swing and miss and cost the taxpayers more money if we do not do something right from the ground. I think Mr. Boyd summarized it great. We have to make sure that we know what we're dealing with and everything with that. We've got to make sure we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted, because on a project this big, that can definitely add up. I've seen it evolve from being a renovation to being a whole full-blown construction. But to get back to Commissioner Pleshnik's, like I said, I hope that answers all your questions. If you want to go over each individual fund after this, we can go over every single fund with that. And so, but we put a majority of our last year's into the public safety facility.
Mr. Matus, though, my recollection was there was substantial amounts put into other funds, and I was just hoping you could give a full summary of where the surplus went.
I wish I would have you would have reached out to me last week, and I would have had that for you. So I will provide that to you.
Good. I just want to make sure we're looking at the full collection of funds, because I know that we save money in different places, and as we're looking at what's potentially, literally legally available towards the jail project. I just want to make sure we're not missing any funds.
Do you have any in particular that you wanted to?
I want to make sure we're not missing anything. I seem to remember there was a large transfer for, and once again, I wasn't on the board, so this is what I heard, and I want to make sure that I'm reviewing those numbers side by side with all the funds. But I thought there was a transfer with respect to the EOC. I think that was in the millions of dollars. And there might have been others. So I just want to make sure we're looking at all the funds, because we want to see what are the scenarios on the opposite extremes. That doesn't necessarily mean that we would do a zero down payment or a $90 million down payment. I just want to make sure we're looking at what is legally available. That way we can then decide what is wise. So just want to make sure we're not missing anything. I think we're looking at most of the funds here, but I don't want to miss any of them.
Absolutely. Like I said, you have on the spreadsheet that I previously sent, it has all the fund balances. Every single fund balance that we have, like I said, I've heard people talk about using Deepwood. I've heard talking about permanent improvement, like I said. So you guys have all the pictures, and we'll pull up EOC right now.
Commissioners, while Mike's doing that, I just wanted to the CARES Act question, Commissioner Hammercheck. I wanted, if you don't mind, like the ARPA provision, we have a $10 million government services provision that the Treasury provided, which is good news. So that will be used, or should, if the board's discretion, toward the Public Safety Center.
And those are different dollars from the CARES Act.
Completely different dollars.
The CDBG,
Yes.
CDB.
Yeah, different dollars, but that one-time injection of cash that you guys have, at this point, have wisely said, hey, what about targeting those towards the Public Safety Center, as well as speaking with the board in general. Commissioner Pleshik, is there other eligible uses within a construction project that maybe we can continue on the ARPA route? I appreciate that. I'm going to do a little bit more digging on some of those. I was talking to Commissioner Pleshik earlier, just to make sure that we, check every eligible expense, because 464 pages of Treasury guidance, and there's a lot going on in there, so I'll continue to work on that.
I know some people, when we just talked about the EOC, so we'll pull that up right now. And I know there has been some discussion by some elected officials about the use of lakeshore improvement funds. That is not going to be an eligible use for a jail. I did work with the state auditor's office, and like I said, that is definitely not an eligible use. So we did do $3 million in emergency center operations. If you look at the fund balance, that is about 6.6 if I recall correctly, and we'll pull it up here. Let's see how close I am. 6.6. With regard to that, that was, I talked to commissioners that linked on 2022 about that, the commissioners that were in place, and the need for renovations at the EOC. Just because we have a jail doesn't mean that the different capital projects stop. I mean, it's an ongoing process with that. So with the EOC, I've heard similar estimates for that of $3 million on a roof replacement. Before we had a diesel tank that was $1 million for that. So as I said, I take my direction from the board. So the board at the time asked me to do that as well. So that is what I did. I am not a decision maker.
I think on the EOC too, it's important to know, I think it was during the heart of COVID, Mr. Hammercheck, if I remember, we had some engineering completed, preliminary engineering and architectural design work. It was right in the middle of COVID.
Renderings.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, renderings. That number was about $19 million back then. So that gave us a fairly solid understanding of a what-if scenario. I remember chatting with Mr. Matus on that. So, yeah, the roof is a bit perplexing out there, but I mean, we're in good shape now. But I just want to let folks know we do have some design work elements and engineering estimates on if there was a project out there, what that liability looks like, and it's about $19 million.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Boyd, Mr. Matus,
Sure.
This is not a criticism of the decision of the board last year. I'm just asking the question, was that decision irreversible? Is this fund earmarked in a legal way where the money can't be taken out and put back into the general fund or for an expense for the jail? Was that an irreversible decision, or is this a fund that could potentially be used for the jail? jail?
No, if you could, that's fine, the $3 million with that. I don't think we would have enough then for the preliminary estimates for a roof, and that's up to the board. I'd work with the prosecutor's office with that, but since the general fund was the one that provided that funds with that, that would be. So, not to be, but $3 million isn't gonna make or break. You saw the movement of the debt service payments, $200,000 for $5 million. So that is, we'll carry out whatever the board would like to do.
And I appreciate that, and I'm very grateful for how responsive you've been to every request that we've made. I just want to make sure that we get another rendition of this sheet. I think it's a great starting point, but I want to see another rendition of this sheet that includes every single fund that legally could be applied to the jail. That doesn't mean that the commissioners would ultimately decide to do so. I just want to have full information right there in front of us where I can plug in a number like you did and see, well, what would it look like if we took X percent, Y percent from every fund that could legally be drawn upon. And then, of course, we say, no, that doesn't make sense. That's unwise. But I think we really want to look at the full picture as we're making the decision on the largest capital project that would ever come out of the general fund. So I think this is an excellent starting point. This is exactly what I hope to see. I just want to make sure that we have that full and complete picture. I also have a question about the Economic Development Fund that's been referenced. I'm not sure the exact what the number of that fund is, but is that fund also one that is potentially capable of going back to the general fund, or is it earmarked in a way that it can't go backwards? I just want to make sure that we're including everything. And there could be funds that I am unaware of that have that flexibility where it could go back to the general fund should the commissioners vote. I just want to make sure we have that comprehensive list and there's nothing that I'm missing.
You like I previously said, you were provided all the funds. I was told that economic development was not, because that is how we fund the Port Authority, and they have been trying to create a bond fund since its inception. So I take my direction from a majority of the board. With that, there's $10 million. You have to fund the Port Authority. If you do expunge that, I know, talking to Commissioner Regovich, I'm not trying to pick on you today, but I know that when we had our first meeting, that was your number one priority with that, and I know you got some stuff in the pipeline with that. So everyone has their own philosophy on this. I think you guys need to tell me what the funds are, because you guys are a board of 3 and I take 2. I was only doing the economic development because I was told that that was not going to be used. The EOC the same way. I mean, you could become creative with a whole bunch of stuff. With like I said, various funds with that. I don't think some of the elected officials will. We tried to charge indirect costs, if I remember, last year, and there was a whole bunch of shit that the elected officials didn't agree with that. And like I said, I know there's a formal opinion going to be sent down to the AG with that. Hell, that will help fund the jail as well. But some departments have determined that was not allowable or questionable with that. So we will, like I said, whatever you guys want to do. If you guys want to take $5 million out of economic development fund, as long as you guys, 2 of you guys, tell me to do that. I have not been directed by that yet.
So Mr. Matus, what I'm asking for is not to make a decision at this dais. I'm just asking, even if the other commissioners don't want to see those numbers, I do.
Yep.
Because I want to have a fully inclusive list, and I'm admitting that you have a level of expertise that's very valuable here. You know which funds are two-way doors. You know which funds could potentially go into either the general fund or the jail specifically. And what I'm asking for is to take the same spreadsheet that you've created and to add every fund that could legally be used toward the jail. That doesn't mean that even I would say that's wise to ultimately use balances from those funds. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And off the top of my head, I was aware that the Economic Development Fund and the EOC Fund could potentially be applied toward the jail. That doesn't mean I think it's wise to do so, but I want to make sure that I'm looking at a global picture as we're making this decision. I could be wrong. I think the other commissioners would benefit from seeing that too. I'd also like to see the spreadsheet expanded, frankly, percentages ranging from 0 to 100. I don't think there's any universe where we do either 0 or 100. I know you have 10 to 50. I just want to see the full range of possibilities so that we're making the decision with all that in mind. Once again, this is not a vote or a decision that this is what we should do or how we should spend the money. I just think that's really valuable information for us to have as we're making that decision as a board.
The one thing I can say is I can provide my recommendations of the funds, but I am not an attorney as well. So they would have to review those as well going forward. So you said that EOC, we have to microwave, but I mean, that's how are you going to fund microwave with that? So I'm sort of perplexed on every fund. Like I said, in a spreadsheet I provided every fund. If you have specific questions on ones, economic development, I'm fine. EOC, I'm sure, like I said, I've heard a whole bunch of, I saw some elected officials email to Mr. Massey on what they can use. Like I said, I know Lakeshore cannot be, but economic development, we definitely could. Like I said, that's up to the board. So that is out of mine. So I will give you, I'll put the EOC on there. I will put the economic development on there.
And I kind of zoned in on these 3 or 4 that you see in front of you today. Mike did provide me, every one of these accounts. I honed in on those, so I will.
I'll update them too.
Yeah, I should have done a better job with that. I understand your point.
And no, this is a great job. This is exactly why we're here. It's to get our starting point and to see, well, what more information do we need to make these decisions? Sure. And I absolutely agree. You should ask, Hackman and DeLeon in the prosecutor's office to look at your proposed list of funds and say, am I wrong with respect to any of these funds? Are there any funds that I'm missing? Yes, we have the full list of funds, but I want to make sure that we're looking specifically at the list of funds.
Do you want certificate of title in there as well? Because that's rightfully general fund dollars. That's why I'm saying then it becomes a political issue with that.
We went there once. Let's not go there.
Well, I'm just saying, I just want to know my direction.
I would say I want to see any fund that could be legally used. No one is making the statement that we're going to exhaust those funds 100% or that we would in fact even use a dime from that fund. But I don't think that we should be making decisions in a vacuum. We want to look at the full pocketbook and balance sheet as we're making these choices.
I'll provide you that spreadsheet with that, and then you guys can talk about, like I said, it's if I would have known these questions before my email on Thursday, I would have had them addressed for you. So with regard to that, because we've only talked about the budget stabilization, the payroll liability, the permanent improvement. Like I said, the EOC, that was directed by the last board. We created a fund for that. So I understand the board changes, and then I'm sure the board will change in the future. Who knows when? Who knows if Jason or I will be here. But yeah, I'll put the Economic Development Fund on there. I'll put the EOC fund on there. And then you guys can decipher. I'll probably even put that crime lab on there. I'm just saying that because Mr. Kolsky's gone. He's gone, so never mind. Like I said, it's like I said, we're only recommenders. So you guys, like I said, we hear a lot of capital needs. So
I'm sorry, Mike.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm going to kick myself for saying this, but on the ED account, for example, economic development account, you guys clearly will make those decisions. We've got Lake County Executive Airport. I didn't know if there was a footnote column. And I'm not going to speak for Mike, that I could say, hey, here's some things that have been talked about so that we, you want the full book, and I agree. But I remember when the Port Authority was formed, the first director they had, we sat and had lunch and said, we need a bond fund. That was 12 years ago, and we were guys like, you got to get to $8 to $9 million before we can do anything significant. So we're there. I understand public safety is a priority, but if we have the opportunity of and this is a very bad example, but an Intel Light. 10 years ago, we had no liquidity to assist in whatever that package may look like. Through very conservative budgeting, we got to this number. Get the airport, we heard from the private sector, the businesses that, hey, we need this. I would like to be able to, even if it's just a commentary like this, so you understand, and I know you guys do, but kind of the history of why we got where we are, understanding that you guys are the sitting board and we can pivot,
we pivot
as needed. But there's usually some context there. But I hear what you're saying.
With regards to the airport, the list that when we had was matching grants could be up to $10 million. So
and we're not committed to those, but
yeah.
we get 90 cents on the dollar, 80-20. The LDA's done a very nice job with minimal local funds of getting that facility up and running. So I understand your point, Commissioner. We'll get to it.
And what we would like to do for the Port Authority eventually is for them to be self-supporting.
Yeah.
So it's no general fund dollars. Right now, we give them $500,000 a year. With that, if the Economic Development Fund is no longer in existence, that's going to be a general fund expenditure that's going to go up with regards to that. So for every action, there's a reaction. So like I said, we have working with the Lake County Development Authority. Like I said, we've worked with the two previous executive directors, and one of their big goal was the bond financing fund. We're not there yet, even still with the $10 million with that, but that was to try to help prevent them from utilizing general fund dollars in the future years. And we've received a lot of requests from the airports, or for the airport, I should say, and other, like I said, I know you have some projects in the pipeline that you would like to see. I've talked to each of you about the economic development. You guys also last week approved the Lakeshore Improvement Fund being utilized for Lake Metro Parks. I heard Commissioner Pleshnik talk about that last week, about the importance of the parks and as a tourism and so forth with that. So so I'll add the economic development, the EOC, and the
We'll go through. We'll just you and I will get together.
yeah, it's like I said, then that's going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to be, like I said, we put on the funds that we talked about so far. So we'll add those few on there with that. And just to give you the background of the EOC, the economic development, et cetera, with that, like I said, we'll add the certificate of title fund on there. We can add the recorder fund on there. Recorder, actually, after 5 years, if she does not use her funds, it shall revert to the general fund from her recorder equipment. So I'll put those on there as well. So there's definitely territorial stuff. We definitely have borne a lot more general fund expenditures this year with the public safety and so forth, of which we carried out your guys's thoughts with that. So there's going to be a cost in the future that I'm worried about of we can say after the jail, I think we all agree that the jail will be completed. However, there's going to be additional cost with that. What I mean by that is staff cost. Staff cost does not go away. Like I said, the prosecutors, this isn't a one-time $703,000. This is 703 times whatever the board graciously gives them for cost of living in the future. Times that by additional things. You heard before what Mr. Gill's talking about that. You know, he's having negotiations right now with unions. He doesn't know where it's going to end up at yet. Same thing that we go for the sheriffs. This is going to be a long-term. When we sat down and talked about the jail costs, I don't mind capital costs because you know they have a beginning and an end. I can plan on that. Public defender, prosecutor's office, the additional courts, that's going to be a big number in the future. That's going to be a big number. Between 3 and 5 million. I don't think there's any questions with that. And of course, the judges can journalize us. I know we've talked about that before, but I know they have watched, like I said, and I've heard a lot about, you know, future payrolls. I'm sure the commissioners have gotten a few phone calls from them as well about, you know, their future with that. So, but I hear you loud and clear, Commissioner, and we will add those new funds on.
So there's another aspect that I think we need to fully delve into, which is when Moody's is looking at our bond rating, what funds and what balances are they looking at specifically? Because maybe part of what we need to do is to move money from some of these other funds into budget stabilization or payroll liability. You know, maybe we have to, even if we don't spend the money, move money from the EOC or economic development into these funds so that we ultimately don't affect our bond rating. Or are they looking at all these funds globally? And specifically, you know, as best as we can guesstimate, where is the turning point of you're going to go down? I think we need to have a more precise conversation there too as well. And if they're looking at 2 or 3 funds in particular, we may need to, even if we don't spend the money, transfer money from some of these other buckets into those funds.
But I asked some of those questions today, actually. The one thing that I wrote down was Moody's, we're going to have to show them how we're going to support the debt
For 30
annually,
years.
30 years. And I think that's all encompassing in the county general fund, Mike, if I understood correctly. But they advise the issue may not be early because we're in a solid fiscal position thanks to this board, current boards, and Mr. Matus. It is if we reduce the carryover, some of these accounts, you know, we're going to have quote unquote tough conversations with Moody's on how we sustain that for 30 years. Now, and as bond counsel said, not that that's not impossible. It's just a different philosophy from which the county has come from in the past. Wrong, right, and different doesn't matter. But I think it's going to be an annual conversation to say how do we support the debt annually. It's all those funds encompassing in the general fund. Is that correct, Mike?
Yep. Yes, sir.
I'd appreciate the footnotes on the,
Okay.
because especially in the Economic Development Fund, that's how we make money in the future. So if we can bring those goals to fruition, and we're a player in the county to bring new jobs here, new business here, those kind of things, that's going to increase our base, as we spoke to many times. So knowing what our goals are there and what those goals should be would greatly help me. And speaking of on the income side of things, I know we talked a lot about interest income being up so much, but with conveyance fees down, what's our net income truly? Because if something's going up that much, I mean something else is going down.
And then also, with that being said, if you utilize fund balance, there's less to invest, so you're going to get less. So like I said, we're just trying to get some direction of how much that you guys want to go into these different accounts. You guys know my stance is, like I said, and this was my direction from the last board, and I understand that's the last board, with what they want to establish over a long term. You guys are a different board. You guys have different goals, different things. So we'll do whatever that you guys, whatever your guys' decision is. Clearing out the EOC when we know that there is a different thing, like you said, that's up to you guys. That's totally, Jason and I take direction from two commissioners. So, like I said, I know I've had our longest conversation was about economic development, you know, for the county just as a whole moving forward with
Is he
that.
picking on me again?
I think so.
I wouldn't say picking, that's just, I know that was one of your major, I know Commissioner Pleshnik has talked to me numerous times about the jail. I know that's one of his #1 priorities. I know Commissioner Hammercheck with public safety. All of you guys are with public safety, but you each have your own specific, what you feel is very important for the county. So it's, we'll take whatever 2/3 of you guys tell us what to do. We'll carry out your
Yeah,
plan.
I think on this particular topic, we hear what you're saying. We'll unexpand all those lines and start to look at what other accounts. I'll add some footnotes that, just for context, please don't. It's just my thoughts on where for the past 10 years and that I've been in this capacity. Maybe give us next week to get through all that, and then we'll represent this sheet and go from there on this particular topic. In the meantime.
Actually, just before you move on, I want to put a real fine point on this before we go on for budgeting our time. It sounds like, and I'm just going to throw the accounts that I'm personally familiar with. We've got general fund carryover, budget stabilization, payroll liability, public safety, ARPA, permanent improvement, EOC, economic development. One of the other ones I might want to throw in there is the interest income, the additional monies. I'm just going to throw a fat number out there. I'm somewhere between 113 million and 120 million. That seems to be about where those, if you add all those up.
Yeah, I'll add all.
Yeah.
But I want us to have if we could have this for our commissioner meeting under old business, just so we can stipulate those are the numbers we're gonna be working with as you start to move forward. Because we need to start locking down a plan. And if we are gonna have a plan, it needs to be a documented plan with financial forecasts that correlate to the bond repayment term. This must be in writing and preferably in an Excel format, accompanied with written assumptions, noting the source or basis of the said assumptions. The other thing we have to talk about is what would the future capital requests approximate over the bond term, and how will the plan address them? I think this is time we reach out to our department heads and the other directors for forecasts for general fund expenses that are typically right now 5 years in nature. We need to obviously stretch that out to the full 30 years. The plan should also entail a general fund forecast that will illustrate the solvency of the general fund at any point in the time during the debt repayment period. And as we've seen with our roads and bridges, there are unforeseen expenses that we're currently facing, and we may face them in the future. If something similar happens in, say, 4 years, if we do strip the general fund of all available resources, what do? So if we're going to do this, we need to put a plan together that's real. So if we could have those numbers so we can stipulate that that's our go forward under old business coming up at our commissioner meeting, and then we can schedule another one of these meetings so that we can actually keep grinding through this.
Commissioner,
Sir.
do you have those accounts, Mike? I wasn't taking notes. I
Oh,
apologize.
yeah, I do.
Okay.
It's
It's
we
the
have
whole kit and caboodle.
we have forecasts out there. With that being said, with the school 5-year forecast, with my auditor days, I've never seen one positive after 10 years. Never, not one time. I'm going to be conservative and bump up expenditures higher than I think the revenues are going to be. So when you get to after year 5 to year 10, we did this preliminary, but when I do that, you're going to see a negative fund balance. You're going to. I have to be. If not, I wouldn't be doing my job. Like I said, I'm very conservative. Like I said, I understand that everyone, last year we did all these cash transfers. Did anyone look at the year before, or 2 years before, or 3 years before, or 5 years before?
I have.
There's some years that we didn't transfer that. Last year was great. Like I said, what we need the vision. Like I said, we'll add on the EOC. We'll add on the economic development. We'll make the footnotes with that, and you guys will make your decision. Like I said, if you look at the spreadsheet that I have up here, there's every single fund that is used. I mean, EOC upgrade to 6.6, the admin center upgrade. Once this project is completely done, hopefully we'll have $1 million or $2 million for that. Until we know that, I know we just signed off on, or the board was going to review a $400,000 elevator with that. We do, as Mr. Boyd, we meet on a quarterly basis with Mr. Eifelis and Mr. Stefanko, and came up with a whole bunch of capital projects with that. And it's been hard to determine what's going on with the jail. Because when we work with our telecommunications director, of a short-term fix or a long-term fix. And there's definitely costs associated with that. You know, do we wire it for 5 years? Do we wire it for a year?
Yeah.
It's so we have been trying to
You're referring when you say wiring into an intercom system.
intercoms.
In case anybody's
Yep.
wondering.
When they worked on the control panels and so forth. With that, Paul does. I think Paul does a great job. So does Mark. But we need some direction, because you can spend good money on a bad problem. It doesn't make the bad problem go away. So.
So I think we'll get to work on that. I'll also I'm going to dig in. I'll probably give council a call on the ARPA eligibility on some of the more fine-tooth items. See what we can't squirrel away. Mike and I will scrub this list again. I think Mike hears you on what you want for Thursday, right, Mike? Those account balances.
The account balances are all here. We'll just,
Yeah.
all I have to run is I heard you loud and clear on the economic development and the EOC. Interest is SORA because that's in the general fund. That is, like I said, we did up our estimate once we got that from that.
But in fairness to Commissioner Pleshnik,
Yeah.
it's, again, put all the cards on the table.
Okay.
The interest, I don't know how I'm going to,
Even if you have an asterisk next to it.
that's fine. It's,
Everything should be included, and I think that's the message. And if you need help from the prosecutor's office in reviewing the funds to confirm whether it's eligible or not, I'm sure that I know that they are happy to assist in that task. And once again, I think we need a little bit of a finer point on, where the turning point is on the bond rating, because we keep talking about how that impacts the interest rate. If they're looking at all the funds, that's fine. If they're looking at certain funds in particular, that's fine. Let's confirm that. And then let's find out what balances they think we start to get into that realm where you're definitely going to be downgraded if you cross this line. You might be if you cross that line. I know we're not going to get an absolutely certain answer, but let's get the most certain answer we can so that we're not talking in vagaries. And if we're looking at all the funds together, it may be that while it looks like 50% is a big deal, it may not be when you consider you're not draining other funds. So I just want to make sure we have a complete answer to that question too.
it's general fund, however, there's not going to be an exact amount.
I tried getting that question today. I'm going to rephrase it to your point. What if any would be a turning point? I'm going to rephrase my question to them, and they're great. Don't get me wrong; they're unbelievable.
And it's all depends on what reviewer you have as well. I don't know if any commissioners have sat through a bond rating. Have any commissioners sat through a bond rating call? I know Mr. Boyd and I have. They ask different questions every single time. With that being that they will want to know, the number one question is, how are you going to pay the debt back? When we talked to our bond counsel and underwriter, that was the number one question. So
And
I don't
the
think you're
second
going to
question.
have exact questions. We asked those exact questions. I asked, how many basis points? What's that? What is? As Commissioner Pleshnik pointed out to me at the one meeting that just he and I had, we try to keep a carryover general fund balance of 20 and 40%. That's a recommendation. It's not a mandatory thing. However, they're gonna want to know what our revenue stream is, not for 1 or 2 years, over 30 years. So that's, I don't know if we're gonna be able to get your exact, and I'm not trying to not answer your question. We asked that question every way. Every scenario this morning, I asked them that before when we met, when was it, around 2 weeks before. Like I said, it's,
That was question one. How do you pay the debt? Right.
Yep.
Question two was, how do you pay said debt in the event of a financial shortfall?
Yep.
Economy goes down. So.
Sustainability.
yes.
Yeah. So, and we could listen. We figure things out here. That's what we do. That's why it's a great county. We'll continue to do that. I'll rephrase that question, Commissioner Pleshnik. I like the word turning point. But sustainability, Commissioner Hammercheck, is very key. And those Mike warned me went into my first bond rating call. I mean, it's a bit like defending a thesis. I mean, they research articles online, meeting minutes, etc. It is a deep dive into the fiscal well-being of said communities.
Well, I'll just repeat that if it turns out that there's this greater focus on the general fund, it may, and we're disadvantaging ourselves by having all these balances in other funds that, for all practical purposes, are general fund because they're interchangeable. We don't want to disadvantage ourselves by maintaining balances in other funds if they're going to have a greater focus on the general fund balance. And I'm not saying that's the case. I just want to make sure we know going in.
I just don't want to play a shell game either. I've been here for 17 years. Everyone can look at the fund balances on you guys get a monthly report. So boards change, direction changes, so that's fine. I just don't want to play a shell game. If we know we're going to have an EOC roof, or if we know we're going to create a bond fund for economic development, I don't want to move it in at the end of the year and move it right out, I think that would be, the state auditors, me being one former one. I don't know any other state auditors that work here. I know some people review the financial transactions, but like I said, they don't like a shell game. And like I said, I take pride in providing you the most accurate information every month as possible. So.
Well, I will just follow on. And I think that we, although, you know, as you pointed out, you're a recommender, not a decider. You're not George W. Bush. You're not the decider. I do think that we personally agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And one of my concerns as we're having this conversation is that different people have mentally spent every dollar in these funds different ways over and over and over again. The ARP money has been spent probably 100 times in different people's minds and priorities and plans. And I'm not just talking about the commissioners. I mean, we've had residents come to our meetings. We've had public officials from other local governments come to our meetings and talk about, you have this balance or that balance or that balance. But what I'm hearing loud and clear from you is when you consider the obligations that we must meet now, there is not this enormous extra fund of money that can be spent on things above and beyond our general fund liabilities every year in payroll and the jail project. I'm hearing there's not this pot of money or fund that we've overlooked that would allow us, you know, 10, 15, 20 million dollars of room into other projects. So I hear you loud and clear. We don't want to overcommit, and we have to be very careful in how we structure this transaction. But one concern that I have is that we make it very clear that these balances have been earmarked more than once. And we're actually going to have to work to make sure that we don't spend them twice, let alone 3, 4, 5 times, so to speak. There's not this huge extra pot of money. I do believe there's enough to meet our priorities. I do believe that tough decisions will get us from point A to point B. But, you know, correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. I don't think we have many millions of extra dollars shaking around above and beyond.
And I think that's the benefit, I'm sorry, Mike, of those line items, for lack of a better term, with the EOC, permanent improvements, public safety. We have those, I'll use the word designated, that's not the right accounting term, so that we don't double spend those dollars. Those we heard boards.
We know that that's
Yeah,
coming.
that's
Like I said,
coming,
I was here when we had the economic downturn. You guys all saw that I put together a plan back in at that time for the board. Mr. Boyd helped me, Mr. Dowd, of everything about what we were facing at the time that we didn't want to face in the future. That's why we created a budget stabilization and payroll liability. That's why we funded a permanent improvement. At one time, the permanent improvement was down to $900,000. $900,000. We spent way more than that on the sheriff range. If we did not have the permanent improvement funds, I probably would not have signed off on the sheriff range. Yeah, you could take some from economic development, but there's no money tree in the backyard. I wish there was. I really do. I wish we could do every priority. I wish we could do every road, every bridge, every project that everyone wants. That's just not the case, because people only can get taxed so much. It is. As I stated before, there's a lot of people on fixed incomes, and that does affect a lot of people. And so the taxes, we want to have the least amount of taxes possible, but carry out your priorities. So that's always been, since I started here in 2006, that's been every board's priority is, everyone has their different priorities, but we try to carry your guys' plan out for everything. So it's, but I've learned from my mistakes in the past. The first thing anyone does when the budget goes to crap is cut out permanent improvement. I've talked to Commissioner Regovich on that. I've talked to Commissioner Hammercheck and Commissioner Pleshnik. That's why we created the EOC. When that diesel tank went, that was 100% general fund expenditure. We had to cut some stuff with that. That's why we have different funds set up for that. I hope in the future, I know Commissioner Pleshnik, you've talked about, I hope we can use all these opioid funds to pay for the jail. I would love it. I would love it. I would love to be the first county with no inside millage for real estate taxes. I would love it. That was my goal. I've talked to Commissioner Hamercheck and Commissioner Regovich about that when we went over the whiteboard that we, individually of course, not group, about when there was a sales tax on place, hopefully reducing the inside millage over a course of 4 years down to 0. I've heard loud and clear about people with a limited amount of money. Got it. Like I said, but we also have to be realistic. Like I said, a $6.2 million debt service payment when we have 1.2 on our plate right now, that's a big undertaking. So there'll be a lot of sacrifices by a lot of different departments going forward if no enhancement in revenue takes place. That's your guys' choice. However, $2 million was just spent this year that we didn't spend previously on the prosecutors and the sheriff. I understand that that's necessary, but that's not small chump change. $2 million is, you know, I mean, that's, and I think it's only going to get worse. I don't think it's going to get better. We made healthcare changes. They weren't popular with a lot of people with the healthcare about, but we saw that we were losing money and so forth with that. We did the best with what finite revenues that we have. Like I said, I just want to look at a sustainability for the future and long-term goals of the county. Totally. Like I said, it's using your savings to pay for your groceries, your general operating, that's a problem. Commissioner Sines said that, and when he said that originally, didn't think it had a, you know, that much of an impactful meaning to me. But the older I get, the longer, if you spend all your savings at home and you have a dishwasher break,
Use the sink.
about a washer or dryer. It's like I said, it's some of those are a backstop. The general fund, if everyone, I wish Mr. Colson was here, is a backstop for everything. If someone can't meet a debt, it's a general fund expenditure. So that's, I just want to, like I said, we will go over everything. I'll go over every fund again. Like I said, I'm not going to use the opioid funds because I mean, there's so, I would love to use all of it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have this discussion if we were using all of it.
Keep in mind that you're referring to the verdict.
Yes, the verdict, sorry.
And there were 2 relatively minor settlements in comparison to the verdict. So
Yeah.
just so if anybody's wondering what we're talking about.
Correct.
Yep, it's, I would love to use, I hope.
And legal counsel has cautioned us not to be talking about the verdict.
Yep. So,
So
I would just like to add too that I hope it's out there that, you know, with the favorite subject of the county's always been the jail. We see you've been working on it for 10 years.
yep.
So, I mean, from 30 million now to 170 million, was quite a, you know.
Like I said, the lowest I had was 15 million. It was funny because when I started redoing everything up for the new, I mean, 10 years, and it was when we originally started, it was a 10 to $15 million project, you know, renovation and stuff. And now it has totally changed. And I'm not trying it from a renovation rebuild to a brand new construction. I've seen that, you know what I mean? And it's who knows what 6 months from now will, and like I said, everything, it changes so much every time. We also had that big, you guys just got another request from IT on the original estimate that from Office 365 was 540 some. Now it went up 100 and some thousand. And that's going to be a yearly expense as well. Like I said, it's, some people can say I can cry wolf and all that stuff. And however, like I said, if I swing and miss, I know what happens to me. If you guys swing and miss, I know what happens to me. So it's, I'm going to be very conservative with this.
I appreciate that, because I could probably look out at the townships and I can tell you in the city, well, look, we didn't have a capital improvement fund.
Yep.
That went away years ago. And, through ARPA and through the things we've gotten recently, a lot of people are catching up right now over 20 some years. I mean, I replaced 30 some year old pickup trucks when I was mayor. But, so I just, we're kicking this can down the road, and I think we're running out of road.
Yep.
And
Yes, sir.
so we have to make decisions. So I don't know if previous boards have sat through this exercise and looked at it. So I appreciate the work you've done and the work you're doing with the bond council and everything, all the information you pulled together, so we can make the best decision.
So we'll, if there's probably other topics, Michael, I'll follow his lead on reviewing these accounts, et cetera. And then also the memo, as far as things that we could be doing at your direction, we'll continue. Yeah, there's plenty of things, should the board desire, that we could continue. As I've said countless times, probably to move the football field closer to the goal line, football closer to the goal line as it relates to public safety center planning, logistics, land acquisition, and office relocation. So,
And if I may, because I know somebody's going to be keying on this, Mike, when you were talking about the range from the 15 million to the 170 million, it was not until we engaged HOK that we were actually getting numbers that you could take to the bank.
Correct. One of the one things that I know the board was
You want to
very-
add the word correct while you're on microphone, please?
One of the things that I know Jason and I have talked about numerous times was all the hypotheticals before, until I know what the dollar amount was. I mean, we've kicked around 60 million, we've kicked around 170 million.
it's technology at its best.
So until we know that, like I said, I didn't really have enough to go on to come up with an amortization schedule of that. And with the ever-changing interest rate, that changes almost every day. Like I said, I know Commissioner Pleshnik and I were on a phone call before with Michelle Hillstrom before, and I know he gets the weekly update from Stifel with that, and it changes. Like I said, if interest earnings go up, I hope they go up dramatically. I hope we hit $50 million in interest earnings. However, I know that's gonna, conveyance fees are gonna stop, as well as when we borrow money, guess what? That's gonna be a significant increase as well. So, it's ever changing. I mean, until I had the dollar amount though, I mean, that's like throwing mud up against a wall and seeing what sticks.
And just briefly, I had this in case we needed it, but this was one of the end products of the programming study that was completed in November, which is the ROM, the rough order of magnitude cost estimate for the potential public safety center. That range, from a 2022 dollar, well, that's passed, was $150 to a 2024 dollar amount valuation of 170 million. So I think I noted this in my opening remarks, but our HOK team has a couple other projects coming in, so we'll have some more recent estimating. I don't know geographically in the United States if those are Midwest or out west as far as correlation to existing construction and market trends, but at least wanted a feeler from them to see what this number still looks like. I hear you loud and clear on this. We really appreciate the dialogue, but if you could give that memo a peek and let me know. Obviously, things would have to come in front of the board for bid documents, demolition contracts, etc. But there's a lot of legwork that goes in from 9 to 5 to get those packets to be adopted in a public session. But there are some things that we can keep moving on. Thank you.
It just to state too, there's not many people that build jails out there. That's a very limited.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Hammercheck and I was 3 years ago. There were 3 firms maybe, and maybe we hear one might be out of that particular discipline. 2, maybe 3. I don't know, Commissioner, if you've heard anything lately, but you're right, Commissioner Ravich. It's a limited field, and with respect to our neighbors to the west, they have a need. There's only a handful of those laborers here in our market, and I'm hearing more and more about the Intel impact on the labor force. Here, people are going to travel. There's going to be housing, etc. So we have to be prepared for that. I know Commissioner Hammercheck and I have talked ad nauseum on local labor, skilled trades here. We were very fortunate. VL Chapman did the electric here out of Grand River, Platform Cement out of Mentor. We had local gals and guys working on this building, and should we move ahead, it'd be great to have that across the street, so. Anything else, Mike? That's what we have on that topic.
So, can we agree then we'll have something for commissioners' meeting on Thursday, talking about the account funds and the balances, and then we can talk a little more formally and maybe pick a date for another one of these sit-downs to go over this in more detail, to run scenarios and sustainability analysis.
Sure. I'll add EOC.
You're off microphone, sir.
I'll add EOC, I'll add economic development, and then I'll add certificate of title, and I'll try my best with the interest.
I don't know that you want to add certificate of title. We don't have control over that.
Sure we do. It's all general fund dollars when it's all said and done. So it rolls up on the general fund, so.
So I guess that's what we need guidance on,
Yeah.
to commit, I mean, because there's all those lists.
Yep,
If we bring something to you, you're like, I didn't know that,
yep.
or do we do,
Yeah.
we have plenty, I'm not trying to create a divide, there's,
Well, that'll do it.
or
I just
maybe.
wanted to have the conversation a couple weeks ago,
I
and
mean, the bottom line is you can create two categories. You can say these are, the funds that are most likely to be used, and these are the ones that are less likely to be used but are legally applicable. There's no reason to exclude any information.
It's gonna be a little bit more than Thursday. You'll have it before the end of the week, but I don't know if I'll have everything you want. I'm gonna have to work with Dave and that, I mean, it's,
Well, there's going to be I don't, if I'm hearing my colleague correctly, we're not looking for an absolute definitive. We can trim things off. We just need to get an idea of what we're looking at. Rough order of magnitude. We may prune the tree,
that's,
but just in full disclosure, let's get it on the table here.
Well, I think we also need to be respectful of the budget staff and the prosecutor's office. I think what I may be hearing is that Mike is saying you're making a pretty big request here. I'm going to do it as quick as I can. If I can get it done by the meeting, I will. But I think you're saying you don't quite want to promise it.
correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Hammercheck, restate your request. I thought you had a handful of accounts you wanted balances on. Commissioner Pleshnik wants us to look at all of them, which we're going to do.
Right, let's just stipulate that we're talking about, again, I'm gonna go over this. General fund carryover, budget stabilization,
Yep,
payroll liability,
yep,
public safety,
yep,
ARPA,
yep,
permanent improvement,
yep,
EOC,
yep,
economic development.
yep.
And I got an asterisk next to this one, interest income.
Those I'll have before Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I
that's-
said, there's
that's
two different requests.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
I wanted to
but
make
it-
sure.
one builds on the other. I want to make sure that my colleague's getting the whole palette in fairness.
Okay.
Fair?
Yeah.
So, Mike, that you can have for new business. I was going to say, if you'd like, I'll make a copy of this and hand it to you. Because I'm getting the data right from all
Well, I
these.
take direction from two. So that's what I'm hearing, two different things.
No.
So I'm trying
One-
to
but one
accomplish.
builds on the other, just to be abundantly
Yeah.
clear. One builds on the other.
I'll have EOC, I'll have economic development for you before Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Again, just to be clear. So to be continued.
Motion to adjourn?
Jason, you have something you want to add?
To Commissioner Pleshnik request, I think that might take a little bit more time.
And that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I completely understand that I've asked for a lot of information.
Okay. And then, like I said, in the meantime, if the board so desires, Mr. Colson's not here, or Hackman, on a SIG file correspondence on some of these action items that we're going to need to do eventually. I've talked to Mike. I think he's okay with bid documents for demolition, office relocation, architectural services. Mike,
Yep.
if the board was fine with that, I could get that in front of you. All this, what I'm trying to say, this stuff takes time.
Yeah.
And I know the board wants to move, and I appreciate that. Revised code says otherwise. We have to go through all the steps with procurement, bidding, etc.
Fair. Engineer Gills, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a couple of comments on the on the whole package that you're talking about, because I've been doing this for a very long time. And I spent 30 years funding projects and reviewing balance sheets with the bond agency and cities and our finances. In fact, we built our business based on being able to do that. But to Jason's point about the Intel, I recently was down in Columbus, and a good friend of mine took me out to Johnsville or whatever it is, where Honda is building a new battery plant. The facility that they're building, I was completely taken back by the amount of land that they had clearing for this particular project. He told me that his company had received $100 million, or not the company, but the city had received $100 million grant from the state to build a water facility just for this particular facility. So in addition to the plant that at Intel, this battery plant, which is going to be huge, is going to be going on at the same time. If you don't think that's not going to suck the labor out of this area, you're in for a big surprise. Secondly, let's talk about a typical example that we have in front of us now. We'll talk about the training center that the sheriff is building. We started out with the main center building being about $400,000. The low bid was over $700,000. We probably have another $25,000 in extras, primarily because people are having a hard time getting stuff on schedule. They're having a hard time planning out getting stuff. So that's kind of where the market is going, and it's not stopping. The construction market is really volatile, going way up and way down depending on what you're buying. Let's now then switch over. We're now out to bids for a small 40 by 40 shed. That started out to be about $125,000, and even that was rather high on the estimates, and it is now over $350,000. And that doesn't include any site work or anything else. So, what we're talking about here when you say, oh, it's going to be between 150 and 170, well, wake up, because you got 4 years of construction. And in those 4 years, you're going to see a considerable increase, and you may be setting that much higher before you're done based on the market. Let's take the Keller Road Bridge that I didn't want to build, but Leroy wanted it, so we have it. It's a 40-foot bridge. It started out at $750,000. The low bid was $1.1 million. We're building it. This is where this is going. So when you start talking about financing this structure or anything in the future, you're going to have to listen to Mike. He's ultra conservative. That's where you really need to be. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gills. Is there anything from us that you need to help you guys in decision making, or were you to try? I appreciate the comments, Commissioner Plechnik. We'll expand on that analysis a bit. Anything else that we can be doing differently in addition to?
Well, while we're sitting here, I think we can all agree as far
Never mind, ask this question. Never mind.
As far as we're talking about the jail project, things that I think we can agree on. Continue with land acquisition. I don't think there's any objection to looking at that. The Camden Stern of any, whatever other names were mixed into that, fitting that out for future use for our public defender and prosecutor's annex, possibly even some storage, I believe, bottom level. I don't think that's an issue. Site demolition, I think we're talking in terms of the old Ohio OSU extension building.
Yes.
And just making that a green space temporarily. Because obviously we have to stabilize the soil, just plant grass seed.
Yep, seed it, straw and seed it.
So then we have to decide what we're going to do with 125. If that's going to be demolished, you're going to use that for some sort of storage facility temporarily.
My suggestion would be to raise both facilities in preparation for a construction site. To your point, Commissioner, thanks for bringing it up. 41 East Erie has a lower level basement that we will use for storage. We'll clear out all the partition walls, and because as you know, we've got other storage needs here in downtown with the clerk and even the commissioner's files, etc. So There is a lot of work to be done, and we have the staff to manage those. We'll need probably some outside eyeballs to help potentially. If we keep 41 East Erie for the long term, you walk the roof with me. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. The boiler looks probably 50 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
It appears to be original.
Yeah, so I guess one suggestion I may have is I may, without objection, or we can talk about it Thursdays, I could present you a skimmed down memo of those action items and place that in SIG file for consideration.
And in the spirit of tapping into every bucket of money we can, I know we've approached the land bank regarding the.
I will be calling Mr. Rogers.
And I think that's fair to give Jason the nod that that's okay.
That's been a great partnership.
Absolutely. And we've eliminated a lot of blighting issues. We've made a number of improvements in the community. I think we've sort of jump-started Paynesville. They're really stepping up and doing a great deal to their credit.
Yeah. Okay. I will.
Have I missed any of the points that we've?
No, I guess if I were to add one more thing, as you look at the schedule, I think we want to get a sense of the earliest that we could get the guaranteed maximum price, because I think that's the point when we really know what our order of magnitude is, and then we're in a position to say what our budget is going to look like for the next 30 years. So I think that would be a valuable data point for everyone, because to the extent that there's another department with another need, we're going to be in the strongest position to address that if we know where we stand.
Right.
So having a sense of when is the earliest we can get that guaranteed price, when is it likely to be, when's the later point it could be, getting a sense of that I think would give people relief in terms of knowing, okay, this is when we're going to have some certitude.
Yeah, great question, Commissioner Pletchnik. Just looking at HOK Stage 2 rough schedule, schematic design is 16 weeks. Okay, that's the first lines on a map, if you will. Those then evolve into design development. That's another 16 weeks. That's 32 weeks. We'll probably start getting numbers. So, we haven't got super detailed into this, but at a certain point, I'm sure Mr. Gilsman, they can start to cost that out, based on market trends. But that GMP, and I'll follow up with HOK tomorrow to see if, what is it, 6 months? Is it 7 months? But we'll get a good handle. I'm thinking 1632, probably 40 weeks in, looking at their timeline on what that looks like. But I'll validate that with the team.
I'd also like to have a better sense of when we're going to have the contract with HOK for the next stage fully vetted. I know the prosecutor's office is working on that hard, but a sense of when it will be ready would certainly be a good thing.
I can try to answer that. I would say 14 days. Had a call this morning with Mr. Applebaum, who's been assisting us, and a conference with Mr. Hackman this morning over some coverage insurance limits. It looks to be the only thing that we found, and Mr. Applebaum has a solution that we agreed upon, and I should be getting his edits by the end of the week. And obviously at that point in time, we would need a signature file, resolution, auditor certificate, etc. My conversations with HOK last week, probably mid-May, before all the disciplines can mobilize. Because you can imagine the amount of professional architects, engineers, etc. that are going to need to be obtained. So, sounds good.
So do I have a second to adjourn? I don't even know if we need to do that, but just.
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Pletchnik? I'm just saying aye, yay, whatever. I'll just run that. Unless you want to do the roll call, Jason?
Aye.
Just hit the gavel.
There you go.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you for joining us today. That's the part we're just making up as we go. All right, we're making progress.